This morning, it looks like President-elect Joe Biden and his team will have an easier transition going forward. So let's bring in our political reporter, Joe St. George. He is live in Washington right now. So, Joe, the big news yesterday was the president's instruction to the GSA. Does this mean that the transfer of power is actually going to happen, that regardless what the president tweets, we are moving past the stage of a contested election?
Yeah, good morning to you, Chris. My goodness, it was a big development last night in Washington, certainly around the country and around the world. President Trump's GSA, General Services Administration. I know it doesn't sound like the most exciting federal bureaucracy in the world, but it's significant for President-elect Biden because there's the organization that basically signs off on the transition of power. It unlocks millions of dollars worth of federal funding so President-elect Biden can have offices, for instance, here in Washington, D.C., can begin the hiring process, which can take some time, resources, and money. But more importantly, it unlocks access to the executive branch of the United States government, federal workers. That means President-elect Biden can receive national security briefings. And in regards to this pandemic and the coronavirus, it means he can interact with the CDC. He can interact with members of the Department of Health and Human Services on the latest vaccine developments, that non-public information that they know about that we don't quite know about regarding this pandemic. So beyond a photograph, a photo op, it was a very significant development, Chris, this morning, last night here in Washington.
Yeah, and we have seen some reaction to it with some high-ranking Republicans already kind of changing course and now congratulating the president-elect on his victory and saying the country moves forward. But we have not heard from either of Florida's senators, and I'm wondering if you think that there's a political reason for that.
No doubt. I mean, there is political loyalty to President Donald Trump. And while the president signed off on the GSA to begin this transition, if you read his tweets, he's still not conceding. His legal team is continuing to go forward with lawsuits, which they've had really zero success with in major states all across the country. So because President Trump has an enormous role and plays an enormous role in Republican Party politics and will continue to do so for going forward. Someone like Senator Marco Rubio is not wanting to go against what the President of the United States wants at this point. So the transition officially beginning behind the scenes, but not yet those congratulations from Florida's top Republicans. But that perhaps will come in due course. Remember, there's a very important runoff election in Georgia on January 5th. Perhaps there's an attempt to motivate Trump supporters in the Peach State to win those races there.
Absolutely. I don't want to make this all about President Trump. Joe Biden's administration is starting to form. And one interesting comparison between the two, the Trump administration cabinet was a bunch of outsiders from outside of Washington. What we've seen so far with the Biden administration, it's Washington insiders, people who have a lot of experience. I'm just curious, how is that city reacting to that? And how will this play out as those departments go to work beginning in January?
Well, look, yeah, Chris, I mean, this is a city that traditionally respects people who have been in the process, who have been in the institutions of government. Remember, that's what President Trump ran and campaigned on 4 years ago to get rid of. So that's why he brought in a lot of outsiders, a lot of governors, a lot of people familiar to the cable news audiences of the world, but not necessarily familiar with Washington, D.C. The exact opposite, right, is happening with President-elect Joe Biden. You have a lot of people who know the city, who know staffers in the city, but perhaps aren't necessarily household names. I think that's the big takeaway for folks waking up in Florida this morning. A lot of experience, but not necessarily a lot of familiarity with people in Florida and around the country, Chris.
Saw 4 years ago. Joe, thank you very much.
Thank you, Joe, for joining us. Well, many